and welcome to my channel. If you are new here, hi, hey, hello, my name is Meg and we do crafty things here. So if you like crafty things, please do consider subscribing. And if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for subscribing and tuning in to another video. So today we're going to do yet another craft. I know I go away for over a month because things were like, let me tell you, maybe one day we'll talk about it, but today is not that day. And I come back with a Kumihimo tutorial, which, don't get me wrong, great video in my opinion, but not one of my normal crafts. And today we're gonna do, yet again, not another one of my normal crafts because I got so many ideas in my brain. I don't know what to do first. So one of you guys suggested a suggestion that I've had a bajillion times and that I had planned to film anyways, which is a crash course in cross stitch. And I was like, heck, why not, friends? So today we're going to do a cross stitch video. We're also going to do something a little bit different because you guys are seeing my face. I'm thinking I'm going to start trying to add in more like face interaction. Does that make sense? I feel like it's kind of nice to have like a face behind the hands. Like normally you guys just see like my little hand gestures. So I feel like this might be a little bit nicer. Let me know. I won't be offended if you don't want to see my face. That's okay too. Let me know what you guys prefer. So with that being said, let's talk about what you need for this craft. So you're gonna need some embroidery floss specifically, not craft thread, not thread, not yarn. You're going to need embroidery floss. So I have got part of my collection here. You're also going to need, of course, because we're working with string, obviously you're going to need scissors, and you're also going to need some kind of fabric. Now I would highly suggest, if you have never done cross stitch before, that you get cross stitch cloth. It's also called Ada cloth and it looks like this. And you can see, is that focusing okay? Hopefully. And you can see that it's got like the holes kind of pre-punched in it. And that just makes it really easy to control the size of your stitches. So you can absolutely cross stitch onto any kind of fabric, but you will have to be very careful with the sizing of your stitches, which makes this great, especially for the first few times that you cross stitch. Otherwise, yeah, you can get this at Walmart. It comes in like a roll. It's generally hanging above the embroidery floss in that same section there at your Walmart or your Michaels. It'll be in that same aisle as well. It's generally in a roll in like a clear plastic container. You'll also need a needle. I would also suggest you get a cross stitch needle. I got these ones again from Walmart. Is there a way to get these? I guess that's kind of, yeah. So these are a gold-plated cross-stitch needle. Basically the main difference between, like a normal needle will do, but basically the main difference between a cross-stitch needle and a normal needle, like sewing needle, is a cross-stitch needle is a little bit bigger. It also has a slightly blunted tip on it, just so that you're not going to stabby yourself. And because if you're using cross stitch fabric, the holes already exist, you don't need to punch through the fabric. And then it also has a larger eye on it. I'm sorry guys, this doesn't seem to want to focus super well. It also has a larger eye on it, so you can get more string through it easier. But you can totally do cross stitch with a normal needle. You're just gonna have to have a little more patience for like threading it and that sort of thing. So let's start with how to even thread your needle to begin with. So as many of us in the bracelet community know, which I feel like if you're a subscriber, that's probably why you're here. You're part of the bracelet community. Embroidery floss is split into a number of threads. So this is loops and threads. Loops and threads is split into 6 strands. Most embroidery floss is, but I have encountered a couple brands, like off brands, not popular brands, that are split into a different amount of threads. And sometimes you'll see it in like different types of thread, like DMC and stuff. Some of their other lines will have more than 6 strands, but this is loops and threads. This is from Michaels. It's split into like there's 6 strands of thread that make up this entire normal strand of embroidery floss. So what I'm gonna do here is we're not going to work with the entire 6 strands. Now, you could, if you wanted a very chunky cross stitch, I suppose, but I was originally taught to do cross stitch with 3 strings, so to split this in half. So you saw I tapped the end of this until it frayed, and then I pulled out 3 and 3, and then I just start to pull it apart. And really take your time, because if you let this go, it will wind back together and just become a mess. So really just take your time. I like to generally, if I have like, see that? Generally, if I have like pants on or a blanket across my lap, I'll like lay it down and split these 2 sections out, because I find the fibers kind of hold on to whatever fabric is on my lap. Of course, I'm wearing like shorts right now because I'm at home and I don't want to be wearing pants right now, so I have shorts on. But you're just gonna take your time and try not to let the 2 sides you're splitting touch, because they will snag together, but you're basically just patiently working your way through this. Now, when I was taught by a family friend how to cross stitch, and she taught me 3 strands. And then when I was in school, I did a family studies course, aka home ec, and that teacher said 2 strands, but in the end, it depends on how thick you want your cross to be. You can do more than 3 strands if you want. You can do 2 strands if you want. It's completely up to you. So once we have that cut, and I don't cut mine too long, it's like a little bit shorter than wingspan, we're going to thread the needle. All right, so we've got our split string here. As we can see, it's like half of the width of our regular embroidery floss here. I've wet the end of this, and I'm just going to feed it through. There we go. A little rough, but we got it. There we are. And I'm going to give myself a generous tail so I don't accidentally pull the needle right off. And we're gonna work from there. Okay, so let's start off with kind of the main thing that I was taught when I started cross stitch. And that has to do with how you actually do your stitches. And that's because you have to be mindful of how the light is going to hit it. So on something like, let's say like, this is loops and thread, so it's got a tiny bit of sheen to it, but something like this, for instance, you can see like on the bobbin that the light hits this piece here different because it's not going the same direction as the other pieces. This is even more noticeable on something that has shine. Let me pull out this sat one. We can see like it really stands out here how the light hits that, and that bobbin doesn't look nearly as smooth as this one. Even if I put this way, like it just stands out a lot more on this. So it's very important when you make your stitches in cross stitch that you do them all the same way. So with that being said, let's jump into how you actually do a stitch. So to start cross stitch, if you're doing a really large pattern, you'll want to find the center of your cloth and work from there. I'm doing a small pattern today, so I'm not too concerned about finding the center or anything, but essentially you would just literally like count out the blocks, find the center of your fabric so that you don't do it too off to one side and run out of space. But our pattern is small today, so I'm not too concerned about that. So I think we are going to go through just here. Here looks like a good spot. And I am working this on an embroidery hoop. I didn't even mention that. You don't need an embroidery hoop. This is from Walmart as well. But it's just a lot easier for me to show you guys how to do this if I'm not trying to like also hold the fabric flat and straight for you guys to see. So I've gone ahead and I've pushed the needle through the back of the cloth, up the top, And I'm going to slowly pull this through, and I say slowly because we want to catch the end of this string on the back here. And I'm just going to pinch it down across the back. Okay, so I'm going to start in the top left-hand corner of my X's, and my first stitch is going to be from the top left to the bottom right. And I'm still pinching, my finger is still on the back here, so just be careful not to stab yourself. That's also why it's nice that these are slightly more blunted. And you're going to pull this down through. Like so, and that is the first half of a cross stitch. So now, because I'm working left to right, I want the second part of my stitch, whether I started with this one or if I went from the bottom to the top, either way, I want my stitch to finish on the side that my next X is on. So I want my next X to be in this box. So rather than coming up here and going down here, like the top right down to the bottom left, I'm going to go up the bottom left and across the top right. Okay, so let's see if we can find that space. There we go. So the bottom left, we're gonna pull, and again, I'm still holding that tail on the back because we really haven't done anything to lock it in yet. And I'm going to finish my cross stitch by going from the bottom left to the top right because we want to finish that X. Boom, there we go, look at that. And that is our first cross stitch. So now this particular pattern has 3 cross stitches across the top, and I need to do 2 more here. So I feel like I just dropped my tail. There we go. So still pinching on the back here. So now I want to make sure that the first leg of my X is the same as this one. So I'm going to come up in the bottom right, because obviously if I come up the top left, like I started at this time, that's where I just put my last stitch in. So I'll just undo the stitch we just did. So I'm gonna come up through this bottom right here. I'm actually gonna flip over here and make sure that my tail, and it is perfect, that my tail is going to be caught under the loop of this to start locking it in. I'm still gonna hold it down until we have a couple more stitches over it because I don't quite trust that yet, but that's what we wanna do, to just hold it in there. Okay. So now I want it to go the same direction as obviously this first one. So now I'm going to go into that top left and pull it tight. And now because my next stitch needs to be over here, I'm going to go into this hole across to this one so that it's closest to the next stitch I need to do. I'm gonna see, whoop, we've got a bit of a knotting situation going on here. And the tail is also caught under that stitch, so that's great. At this point, I think I feel comfortable enough to stop holding on to that tail, but to each their own. There we go. So now this time I'm going to do it slightly different because the next stitch I want to do is actually going to be directly underneath the stitch we're about to do. So just like the first time, we're going to start off like we did for our last stitch here, which is coming up the bottom right corner and going down the top left. So now, because the next stitch I want to do is actually going to be underneath this one, I always prefer to finish my stitch off closest to the next box I want to stitch in. So because the next box I want to stitch in is this one, I would prefer if my thread ends up on the bottom of this X. So I'm actually going to go into the top right of this X and go down through the bottom left of this X. So we can see when we take a nice up and close look here, we can see that the threads on all of my X's are the exact same direction, and that is what we want, because you can actually quite see fairly well here just how the light hits it, that makes a big difference. If you could imagine one of these going the opposite direction, the light would be hitting, like, let's say this X completely different, which unless you're, you know, really paying close attention, it might not be a big deal, but I was taught that that's a big deal. So you want to make sure your X's are all in the same direction. So that is how you do an individual, out of focus. That is how you do an individual cross stitch. So let me show you what you can do if you have a line of color all in one go. So this pattern calls for a stitch in this dark pink here, here, and here. So what I'm going to do is my last stitch that I put down, my needle went through here. So obviously I can't come up from there because I'll just undo this. So I'm going to come here, then to here, and then I'm actually going to go across to here and go down to here. And I'm going to show you, you can do half stitches all the way across your line and then finish them. So I'll show you that technique as well. So I'm going to go down to here and up, and then I'm going to go down the top left as you do, and then we're going to go up the, I was going to do a normal cross stitch. So we've gone up through the bottom right, down through the top left. Now I'm going to pop over to what would be like the top right of this square that we were just working in. And I'm actually going to move into the next square and go from here down on that same diagonal. So the top left of the next square over to the bottom right of the next square over. And then do it again here. Top left, down to the bottom right. Like so, and then you can work your way back across the row. So now we're gonna go into the top right of this last square that we just did, come across here, then go up and come across, up and come across. And that's going to look like this. This is particularly handy, like if you're doing a larger pattern that's got a really big section of colors and you're just gonna go back and forth across the lines. This maybe isn't ideal for this small of a pattern. I would have preferred personally to have my last stitch ending up over here because my next stitch needs to go down a line, but is what it is. I wanted to show you guys that you can do that as well. So there we go. Just like that. You can do your stitches like that as well. Now, another thing I was always told is rule of thumb, you don't want to skip over more than 2 boxes because all your strings carry on the back. Ooh, speaking of which, we've got some knotting happening back here. So like I was saying, personally, I would have preferred to end this over here because my next stitch needs to be down here, but I did want to show you guys how to do that, which does actually lead into the next tip that I was told when I learned, which is to not skip more than 2 knots of color. So in a bracelet, for instance, if we were knotting, we would just carry the strings across the back, and the strings carry across the back here as well. So you can imagine if I was to be going way over here for my next section of pink, there would be a long thread along the back of this that would be there. And now because it's all attached, like if we watch this, if you watch this last X here, if I pull this string, it like deforms the X. It pulls it a completely different shape. So we don't want to be doing that. That is a no-go. So the rule of thumb that I was told was to never skip more than 2 boxes, just because that leaves a small enough loop that it's not likely to get snagged. So in this case, I want to put my next stitch right here. So we are within that bounds, but that was a trick that I was told when I was first learning. Whether anyone else follows that, I don't really know, but that is something that I was told. Really? I'm gonna try and get this out again. So the next stitch I want to do is in this block here, and I want to keep everything obviously going the same direction. So I'm going to come up through the top left. Ooh, the focus, man, the focus. Down through the bottom right. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and continue with my outline here, just doing my X's, and then I will, when I get to the end of my string, show you how I tie out. Okay, so I'm getting irritated with this knot, so I'm gonna cut it out, and I'm going to actually show you guys how to tie off with a color. Okay, so now I've reached a point that I don't want to continue using this thread, because if I go much shorter, I'm not gonna be able to tie off. So we're gonna flip over to the back here, and I'm going to show you what I do to tie off. So now I'm going to take my loose end, and I'm going to feed it through the back of a couple of stitches. And very specifically through the back. So if you want, you can check the front, make sure you didn't actually stick through. Just through the back loops. And I'm going to carefully pull the tail out on this because I went a little bit short with this. Okay, we've reached that point, so I've got this loop here, and I'm literally just going to tie a knot. Just like that, and then I'm just going to feed the tail down through some other loops to just kind of tuck it out of the way, and then I can trim this and move to another color or add more thread in. So in this case, I'm going to add more thread in, but at this point, I'm just going to time lapse it out so you guys can see what the rest of the pattern looks like. So there is my finished product. I think it turned out really cute. And here is the back. I did break my own rule because I realized I finished all the light pink and I had forgot to do the tiny X in the middle of the P. So I did break my own rule here and moved across multiple squares, but other than that, like I said, it's pretty straightforward once you know how to get started. So if you guys enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up. If you do have any questions, just leave them in the box below. And until next time, guys, bye!